Hello and welcome to the King Street Cinema podcast. It's the first episode of 2025.
Yay!
Happy New Year. My name's Andy, joined as ever by James. Hello, James.
How's it going?
Groovy. Let's just quickly introduce ourselves as it's a new year. We might have some new listeners.
Good idea.
My name's Andy. I've been podcasting now for a few years. Started with a little podcast called The Film School Dropouts, and then went on and done my own one called ACM's Vault of Coal. As well as doing a local Suffolk-based one called Faces of Suffolk.
Yeah.
Those other ones have kind of been put on hold for a bit. I've been doing this for a while with James. We've got a new podcast on the way though, which I will mention this at some point. And James hopefully will be involved in that as well. And James,
hi.
Introduce yourself, young man.
Hello, I'm James. I am part of this wonderful podcast for King Street Cinema. I work at King Street Cinema as mainly technical, but do all-round bits and pieces here and there as well. And yeah, been doing this with you now for what, 2 or 3 years?
At least 2, isn't it?
2 years. Well, this is probably the 3rd year we're coming into now.
Whoa.
And I've also been on the other one, the Vault of Cult, as well a few times, and of course was it Faces of Suffolk?
Yeah,
we were also a part of that, the cinema.
Yeah, I came and interviewed you guys,
yeah.
and we talked about the cinema. That was 2 years ago.
Oh, it feels like it was longer, but yeah. To
me, it doesn't.
There's been so much has happened and changed with the cinema over the few years that we've been open as King Street Cinema, because it used to be, of course, Ipswich Film Theatre. Which I also was a part of. So I've been there a long time. Yeah. And I do feel like a lot has changed for the better.
Yeah, so, it's good to hear.
Yeah.
So we'll mention it now actually. Follow the cinema on all the socials.
Absolutely.
On Facebook, Instagram. Are you on Threads as well now?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the way to do it. Loads of updates. I could say this as an outsider from the cinema. I think the stuff you put online stuff's really good. There's a lot of content without doing the editing, so to speak.
Oh, that's good.
And you can just click on the button on the website and everything's right there in front of you.
Yeah.
So,
I think the website's very well put together.
Yeah.
Easy to navigate through, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy. And then you put out a little brochure or leaflet every month.
Yeah, that's right. It's very nice in the old-fashioned style, as the cinema used to do pretty much back in its early days. Yeah. So it's kind of a throwback homage to the memory of the cinema. The importance of that is that we are now 50 years this year of being open as an independent cinema, the only one in Ipswich, and the longest running still standing cinema existing in Ipswich.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's something to be very proud of. And so we'll it's 50th anniversary. So we're going to start with mainly focus this week as this month, like most months, on the retro films. Yeah. Basically, because we can talk about them more because we'll have seen them.
Yeah, though you have seen a few of these that we have this month as well, and I have seen a couple, in fact.
We'll get onto that at the end. Yeah. So there's loads of stuff coming up, but the 2 films we're going to focus on both star the same actor, Brad Pitt.
That's right.
2 early-ish films for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
one before his big break, you'd say, which we've got, definitely would say probably an Interview with a Vampire was the film that really made him, people go, wow, that's the guy, which came out the year before the first one we're going to talk about, which is Se7en.
Yeah.
But in 92, which was the year the other film came out, The Cool World, he was upcoming, a face, but wasn't a star yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think the film people first took notice of him majorly took notice of him was Thelma and Louise.
Absolutely. As a point, right, that was definitely the film that people were like, oh, wow, that's a guy. That's the guy to look out for. But Interview with the Vampire, the movie, it was the big, huge movie where he's the star. Yeah. And he's, from then on is, the international superstar that he is.
The dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll start with Se7en. It's its 30th anniversary. And this is a film, so I'd have been 13, 14 when this comes out. I still remember quite vividly.
Me too.
It coming out. It was a big thing, a big deal. And one of those movies that I'm not sure people expect it to be.
No, it's definitely a sleeper hit, as they say. A movie that I think the studio it was made by would not have thought of it as being a film that was going to do anywhere near as well as it did. Yeah. But it was a huge success.
Yeah. made so much money, and for a R-rated American 18 certificate film here as well, that says a lot. And the director, who is David Fincher, isn't it?
Yes.
Who now is a massive name.
Huge.
This came after. Was it the first film he'd done after Alien 3?
It is.
Which famously bombed, and I think he even tried to remove his name from it, didn't he?
That's probably true. I do know that he had, after his experience on that movie, had no interest in making films again.
Yeah.
At that point, at the end of that film, he was done with making feature movies, and it was only on the basis of the strength of the script that he was given, read, that he was thought, right, this is something I could do, as long as I have control on the film.
Yeah.
So
So
that's an interesting little thing to think, that we may never have seen David Fincher again after Alien 3 if it wasn't necessarily for a good script to come along.
Yeah, and arguably his best work has been since.
Yeah.
Yeah, or his most successful work anyway.
Absolutely. He continues to make movies that do extremely well.
Yeah, both critically and commercially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he's certainly one of the most important names of his generation in Hollywood, without question.
Yeah, and with this movie, to come off the back of that, firstly to get Brad Pitt, who, as you say, was just breaking through. Interview for Vampire had just come out. He might have signed on to this one before that. I don't know.
No, he hadn't.
He hadn't. Okay, so he obviously liked the script. He wanted to do it.
This was very important for him to make this kind of movie, because it was very different to the sort of thing that he'd been known for. So they say, Interview with Vampire comes out, he's extremely well known as that image, right?
Yeah.
That look, long hair, very pretty, very short. It was vampire, but it's fantasy, gothic, romantic.
Yeah.
He wanted very much away from that. He wanted more hard-boiled, gruff-looking face, maybe a bit of an idiot as well. Not the smartest, most charismatic necessarily man in the room. Something with a bit more depth and a bit more nuance and flaws.
You got to remember as well, this was mid-90s and an era, more so today, I'd say, of the teenage pin-up on the wall sort of posters, and he wanted to get away from that image. I think 90s Baywatch was in its heyday, all that sort of thing, and he wanted to be taken seriously as an actor because he's a good actor.
Yeah, we found that out, because he was very much, like you say, that's what he wanted. He wanted to prove that he was a real actor, not just the pretty boy.
Not a himbo.
A himbo.
That's the phrase. And Morgan Freeman.
Yes.
Who... Did he win the Oscar for Driving Miss Daisy a few years before?
Oh, don't ask me questions like that, because I really don't know.
Certainly critically acclaimed. Been around for years.
He's been around a long time. Certainly I'm sure has won big awards.
Yeah, he's definitely been nominated for big awards.
Certainly, without question.
And
I'm sure if he didn't win for Driving Miss Daisy, he was nominated. There were other movies around that time, like Glory as well, that was a big hit, and people. But I think Denzel Washington, got the Oscar for that one in supporting role. But anyway, so he'd been in films that had been critically acclaimed, and himself had also had that recognition.
Do you know the film where you first took notice of Morgan Freeman? Because I can tell you mine. A few years before this for me.
Really?
I was young.
To me, when I think of Morgan Freeman, I remember seeing him in, which I just mentioned, Glory, because I'd seen that maybe a year before I'd seen this, and I can't really think of. And even though that came out in '89, but but I can't really in my head, and I've never seen, and I still haven't seen Driving Miss Daisy.
Really? Yeah.
So I can't say that. I knew that of the film, I knew of the image and stuff of the people in it, but I hadn't seen the movie.
Yeah, I had because of the Dan Aykroyd connection.
Right. Yeah.
But for me, it was Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Right, and now see, that's true, right? I'd definitely seen that film well before these. I saw it at the cinema when it came out, but he always becomes sort of not something I remember of the film, even though his character is great and he's wonderful in it. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, to me, you can't get away from Costner. You can't get away from Kevin Costner being just like the only thing, pretty much, and Alan Rickman. Yeah. I just somehow he always draws a blank with me in that movie, and I have to always be reminded that it's him in it.
Well, that's because I think just then talking, I thought straight away you'd know what I was getting at. And you
yeah,
didn't.
because we've talked about it before.
Yeah.
We've mentioned
Okay.
you've mentioned this to me before,
Yeah.
and I still I draw a blank on it every time.
But
it's so weird.
It's weird how different it is to me, because straight away I was like, that's
right.
That's him.
That's interesting. I mean, Prince of Thieves for you is a massive movie, like really important to you. You love it. You've got loads of merchandise and memorabilia. He has a whole room dedicated to Kevin Costner. Yeah. So, of course. But to me, I love the film as a kid, but it's not one that I generally go back to and I watch very much. So it's not really, doesn't have that kind of memory so much for me. So greatly.
Did you see it in cinema?
I did.
Okay.
I remember which cinema as well. I saw a tiny little cinema,
but
full cinema in Wales, of all places.
For me, though, it's strange that this is only 4 years after that.
Sure.
It feels like a long time after, and it feels like he'd done a lot in between the two movies as well.
Yeah.
And it's a strange, that film, Prince of Thieves isn't as well remembered as, it's forgotten what Big Hit is, I think.
Absolutely.
Whereas this movie, and it's probably because of the qualities in the two movies, this movie is remembered fondly, and so it should be. 30th anniversary screenings, deservedly so. Very influential movie.
I agree. I mean, if we're going to talk about just the look as well, we're going to start off with just describing the feel, the aesthetic, the look of Seven. When that film comes out, almost every thriller after it is now, we still live in a time of David Fincher's image of the world, right? Bleak, dark, rainy, untrustworthy of everyone and everything. This has become the kind of the image, and this really does start. There are other movies around the same time. I often bring up a film that came out before it as being perhaps even the start of that in a way, which was we did a podcast on it, and now I'm forgetting. Last Action Hero. In the film Last Action Hero, we have a contrast between the crazy, zany, glitzy world of the movies and the real world that the boy in the film lives in, which is a very rainy, dark, miserable place. And that continues on in Seven, where Seven is, but we've now got rid of the fantasy world completely, where just reality is dark, rainy, gloomy, whatever, just awful. And why? Because the question in the movie in Seven is, why does evil exist?
Yeah.
And the answer is because it just does.
Yeah.
And there is no answer.
Yeah. So I like the Last Action Hero comparison, because to me it's kind of, I see it as almost a reaction maybe, or we'd had enough of the simple light-hearted buddy cop movies.
Yes.
And this is, it could be called that, I suppose.
It is a buddy cop.
But it's not the cheesy.
Absolutely
it's not the they pull out in their flash card guitar solo playing.
Exactly. You've got the music of Howard Shore,
legend.
Which is an absolute legend, who does great on this job. And a big part of the greatness of the job is you don't really notice it because it incorporated into the feel of the film. It's not something that stands out as like, oh, there's the music to the movie. It is the movie. It's a part of it, and he's great at doing that.
Yeah, and it's so dark, and it is violent.
Yes,
but not in the.
It's gruesome.
Yeah, but it's almost not. It's not famous for being violent. It's famous for being a good thriller, really.
Yes,
isn't it?
with a twist, with a massive twist.
Yeah. And holds up. I've not seen it for 5 or 6 years. Maybe
I watched it maybe a month ago, I still very much enjoy it.
Yeah,
I still very much think it's a great film. And as the years go by, you just notice more and more how important and influential it is.
Yeah, and it is that typical, at the time, it was spoofed so much that that's always a sign of a good film, I think, if it's spoofed. You don't really, unless it's a massive, say, bomb of a movie, you don't see it spoofed. If it's done well, you see loads of parodies.
Yeah.
And that's only can be taken as a compliment.
Sure, I agree completely.
With this,
it's in the public consciousness, right?
Yeah.
It's what everyone's thinking about. So if you're spoofing it and lambasting it in that way, you are basically saying, hey, we recognise you.
Yeah. And was this the first big film with Gwyneth Paltrow?
That she... been in, I would have thought so. Certainly, it's got to certainly be the most successful film up to that point that she'd been in. Yeah.
Because I'm not going to lie.
I mean, she was in Hook. Well, that wasn't a successful film.
Was it?
Hook, for very briefly. Like I say, because I don't know, up to this film, I don't know how many. I mean, even in this film, though, her role is important, but small.
Small, yeah. And that's what I mean. She got noticed in this as well. Because I can't think of anything. I didn't realise she was in Hook.
Only for a second.
She must have been pretty young.
Yeah. She's just in it for just 1 month. But again, Hook is only 4 years before this.
Well, yeah, true.
Remember? But yes, she would have been young. 18 or something.
Yeah. But yeah, I just want to talk about this film. It sounds a bit selfish because I want to see it when you show it. And it is that one that you can't watch too close together because of you need to forget certain parts of it if you've seen it before. I think. But I've never seen it on the big screen.
No.
Far too young when it came out.
Sure.
But it was one that a friend got hold of on video as soon as it came out, and we watched it.
Yeah, I got it. I rented it out. I mean, again, I don't know. Back then we did really. By the time you're sort of 13, 14, you're seeing 18s on video. It's not that big of a deal really. Saw it pretty much straight away when it was out in the shop.
Yeah, and it was even at that young age, is enjoyable the right word? I think it is.
I remember being quite I enjoy. Yeah, it's an interesting word, isn't it? Because enjoyment, as in you're appreciating what it is. Like you go, oh, this is a really good thriller. You're really invested in it, and you want to know, how it's all going to turn out. But at the same time, you feel sad and cold and a bit depressed. Yeah, because those are all the elements to the film. I mean, there is hope in there, which is in our character Morgan Freeman. Yeah, but it is still, it's engulfed completely with all of this. There is no happy ending attitude.
Which is another. It's totally against what you had 10 years ago in the movies. Yeah, and it's I think this year, 95. Nowadays, we look back with fondness on the 90s for good reason. There's some great films, great music, but it was. Looking back, everything was so depressing. You had grunge, you had The Crow, which we've spoken about, and it wasn't. Yeah,
the music coming out, reflecting of the time, of the feeling of the time, which is really So you say grunge. And there's a lot of industrial kind of rock music, like 9 Inch Nails, who music features in this film. Yeah. And there's a lot of that feel to it,
But this as well is something more aimed at adults, I'd say. Whereas something like The Crow was a very teenage thing. But I can remember my dad talking about Se7en and liking Se7en. And this is a guy who now is 75, so then would have been a little bit older than we are now. Yeah. Wasn't a bit interested in things like The Crow. No. Didn't like Tarantino, too trendy maybe, too like it's everywhere, I can't be bothered with this guy. Yeah. But Se7en he really enjoyed. And I think the draw for him was possibly Morgan Freeman. Sure. And because I actually drove him stage, I watched it with my dad. He was like, this is. But I think a lot of people, this appealed to a lot of generations. Younger people wanted to see it because of what it was, and it was their era's movie. And they had to appeal to Brad Pitt, who might have got some people into it who wouldn't have watched it normally.
Without question.
And luckily, it's a damn good film. Yeah. You often get these draws for movies and then they don't follow it up. Yeah. This definitely does.
Well, it's just the script is good. It's solid script. It's interesting. It's not, it's not revolutionary or anything or unique in a lot of ways. It's just a very well put together story, thriller, cop, procedural movie, which is, nice to see. Because again, like you were saying, it's not doing all the things that have come recently that have been very popular. It's doing something that, in a way, has got a bit of a throwbacky kind of feel, maybe to a 70s, more obviously grittier kind of idea. But at the same time, is now of its time. Yeah. So and that's really, for me, what makes it work on the more practical level. Of course, if the two leads didn't have the chemistry that they have and weren't as good as they are, it would not have been anywhere near if a success at all, because there is far too much to it. I think that is too, not necessarily generic, but we've seen a lot of this stuff before on the surface, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
It needs really good, and which it has, really good actors selling it. Yeah.
But the stuff that is familiar, I think, is why a lot of the mainstream liked it, because it's not too far away from what they're used to. They sort of feel comfortable watching it.
That's what I was going to say about your dad, right? Your dad likes the certainly would like sort of the thriller kind of, cop type story,
Dirty
these
Harry
kind of
type
stories.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Which and I mean, film that we showed recently on VHS that your parents came to see.
Oh, Taken of
which has that kind of that kind of thing. It's a completely different kind of story necessarily, but it's in the same area, it's in the same ballpark of these kind of these sort of thrillery kind of stories made in the 70s, which I think like, it's Seven is not an 80s movie, like it's not looking at the 80s at all. It's looking forward with the feeling, I think, of more noir-y kind of stuff. So even earlier to the 70s, you can say to the 40s.
That's why I think it is a big one of the reasons it worked is because we were sick of all that stuff in the 80s and early 90s, if we're honest. And that's why it stood out. Also, it's so dark, and the killer theme of it, in the way of, say, Silence of the Lambs, it could appeal to horror fans as well.
Sure.
So it's got a lot to offer for a lot of people.
Yes.
And that's why it was one of the biggest films of 95, if not.
Again, don't know how big of a film it was compared to other movies that came. I'm sure it wasn't the biggest movie.
Oh no, but for that certificate.
It's
sort of 34 million, and it made 327 million.
Yeah, worldwide, which
good.
Is really great. Yeah, really good. I mean, I'm sure that, like I say, they were not expecting those kind of numbers. I mean, I heard that the test screenings were very middling. That they were sort of humming and hawing about, the tone of the film, and being able to keep it as it was, how it was intended to be, must have been a bit of a struggle, because they did get, the filmmakers got their way. They didn't. The film wasn't changed.
Excuse me.
So that's good in a sense, because they could have lightened the mood and the tone of the film just to appease certain people.
Yeah, and then it wouldn't have been as big a hit, and I don't think it'd be as remembered.
No.
So, excuse my coughing, by the way, we'll get that out of the way. You won't catch it through listening to the show. James, I'm sorry.
It's quite all right. I've got a strong immune system.
Yeah. Probably caught it from you anyway. but critically acclaimed as well. Even now, you look on IMDb, it's got 8.6 out of 10, which is really good. And 83% on the Rotten Tomatoes.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
That's good, isn't it?
I want to do a little thing I quite like doing on occasion for this one. I think there's some interesting names that were mentioned, So Brad Pitt, there were other people for the Brad Pitt character. Yeah. So what do you think of Sylvester Stallone playing?
The listeners can't see my expression. It would have been certainly a different movie.
Yeah, well, he turned it down.
Thank God.
And Denzel Washington also turned down the role.
That could work.
I think so. I think that could have been okay. Now, there's some interesting ones for the Freeman character as well. Robert Duvall turned it down.
Yeah.
Gene Hackman
also
turned it down. And Pacino as well.
Turned
it down. I mean, I think all of those could have worked. Again, differently, but I still think would have been still good character, strong actors, characters that they... Again, you can see why they turned it down.
Yeah.
Because they say, I've either done this kind of thing before. It's a little too much in the violency, aggressive tone. I probably want something, something where I know guaranteed I'm going to, there's going to be some capital here.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get that there would be too much risk, I think, for names that big, especially Hackman and Pacino.
Yeah, they're big actors. Would overshadow.
Not saying Freeman wasn't.
No, but he's still a character actor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even now, after very few films have got his name above the title. Don't need to. You just need his face on the poster, really. But I think Stallone would have been a different film. The others would have worked, but it is that this is so those two actors that it's very difficult to imagine anybody else playing them. And which is a good sign. There's no weak link in this movie.
I agree. Now the killer, the villain, there was a person that was the original person they wanted for the movie, Ned Beatty, of all people. Now, here's a quote that he said. The reason why he did it, he was like, "No, I'm not going to do that movie, and here's why. It's the most evil thing I've ever read."
Oh.
So there you go. It was like, I'm not being involved in this movie. It's the most evil thing I've ever read.
Okay, that wasn't when they offered him Superman 4.
So apparently it had something to do with him looking kind of like the sketch of the Zodiac Killer.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I've looked at that sketch and looked at Ned Beatty, and they don't look the same to me. But apparently that's what they said. People thought, looks like Ned Beatty. He'd be. That's what people would think. They'll think, Zodiac Killer. They'll put those connections together.
So basically, brought back bad memories of the times he kept getting arrested.
Yeah. So yeah.
Fincher went on to make Zodiac, didn't he?
He did, in 2007. It's a really good film.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, it's really good. I definitely recommend it. It's a bit long-winded, but it's still good. Yeah. It's still good. Yeah.
Yeah, so...
And that's the thing that I like about Se7en, actually, is that Se7en to me doesn't feel like it's too long.
No.
Right?
It's still under 2 hours, isn't it?
I think so. It's not, because we're still at that point. We're still in the mid-90s. We're not in the era yet of 2.5 hour movies that every movie has to be, that's of this kind, has to be 2.5 hours or more. So, absolutely no need.
Yeah. I will add as well, if you can hear noise, it's very windy outside, and the sign from our pub I can hear.
Yeah, and my phone just made a sound as well.
I didn't hear that. Thanks for pointing out. So should we?
Should we move on? I recommend everyone should be going to see this. Of course,
there's no kids matinee.
No, there's no kids. Well, that's it. Obviously, of age.
Yeah, it's on the Friday the 17th and Saturday the 18th of January at 7:30 p.m.
Yeah, for both.
Don't forget, we mentioned the website and stuff. Obviously, you can book tickets through that. And it's easy. Even I can do it.
Yeah,
and I'm an idiot.
Yeah, well, that's what they say.
Yes.
So 18 certificate on that one.
Yes, rated R.
Yeah.
That's the 17th. The next movie we're going to talk about is the archive VHS screening.
Yeah.
On the 31st, Friday night.
Yeah.
Also at 7:30, Cool World, which is another movie that I remember very well coming out.
Well, a lot of marketing on this one, I remember.
Yeah.
Directed not necessarily in the wrong places, because this is I think I just watched a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have been watching at this time. So I saw a lot of the marketing for it. This is not a kids movie. No. And I think that sometimes people get the idea that this was pushed at children because there's animation in it.
Yeah.
But it's not, and it wasn't. This was never designed, even though in America it did end up with a PG-13 certificate, I believe.
It did, yeah.
15 over here, and still is, and rightfully so. This is not a kids' movie, right? In any way.
If you look at what the director done before it,
no, indeed,
you can tell it's not.
Though saying that, the first film that I ever saw of his, which I grew up watching as a kid, which was his adaptation of Lord of the Rings, which I remember very fondly as a child watching over and over again. So he did have that.
Yeah.
Right? And he does come from the Mighty Mouse. He was involved in Mighty Mouse in the 60s. Not the creator, but did a lot of the animation, and throughout the decades, even in the 80s, brought it back again. Revised it, which I remember seeing as well as a kid. So he has background in making things for more of a family orientated.
Yeah, I mean, even Lord of the Rings, it isn't kiddie.
No, it's not kiddie, but it's not. But it's certainly not. I think it was a PG when I was a kid. I think now is 12, perhaps.
Yeah.
But certainly the things that he's more famous or infamous for are making adult animated movies, mostly. Though they are crossover, I'd say a lot of them. So we have a lot of animation mixed with live action.
Yeah, pre-Roger Rabbit, a lot of that.
Yes, indeed. And this film and story was...
Should we say what we're talking about, by the way?
Yeah, sure. So this is Cool World.
No, the director as well.
All right, so Ralph Bakshi. I think if people don't know his name, they certainly would know the style of animation. It's very famous. Again, and I think perhaps for a few people more infamous than famous, in the sense that there are certainly people that find it very controversial work, work that probably is very risque today with our sensibilities, probably seen as very uncool.
Yeah, I mean, one of his films I don't think I'd even want to say the title of on this.
Yeah, I was thinking of mentioning, but I won't bother with it. But it's a film I have seen and actually admire quite a lot. But yes, very much of their time, and very, very risky movies. This one is more of a middle kind of the road when it comes to that kind of thing. This film, as much as I like it, I can completely understand why certain people may have not necessarily enjoy it so much, because the production of this film clearly was a bit of a mess. You have two fighting things going on. You have the creators with their vision, and then the people that want to produce it to make sure that enough people are going to enjoy it and we can make money on it.
Yeah.
And that battle, clearly there was no middle ground found.
Yeah.
So we have two movies going on, which I enjoy very much. This is not the only time that this has happened where it's a film that I go, oh yeah, I quite like that about it.
There's a lot to admire, and it is one of those movies to anybody. I'd say you've got to see it.
Yeah, you have to see it. It's quite incredible.
Yeah.
Just when you look at it and go, wow, they got that made.
So I'll quickly go over the premise, because I think more people wouldn't have seen this than Seven, or at least know about it.
Yeah.
Basically, it's starts off in the 1940s.
That's right.
And
after World War II.
World War II, someone comes home from the war.
That's right.
Visits his mother, takes her out on his motorcycle to show off a bit, and basically to spend time with his mum. Gets hit by a car, mother dies, and then weirdly he kind of gets sucked into this animated world.
Yeah.
Doesn't he?
So there is another world that's coexisting with ours called the Cool World, which is where things like animation kind of world, real life animation existing. And there is a rip between the two worlds created by a doctor who lives in the animated world.
Yeah.
And he wants to be able to find a way that he can go over to the other side. And by doing this, a byproduct happens, which is sucking in people from the real world into the cool world. And it just happens to be our man, Brad Pitt.
Who stays there and becomes like a
police,
and basically stopping animated or doodles. They call
them doodles. Yeah.
And what are they called? Noids.
Noids are the humans. Yeah,
humanoids.
Yeah.
Noids. From getting together, so to speak, because it is told that if I'll just say cartoon and human.
Yeah.
Easier. Make the love. It all goes bad. This is what they're told. And one of the cartoons portrayed Hollywood, isn't it?
Yes.
Portrayed by Kim Basinger. Wants to get this side, basically.
Yeah. So who wants to become human?
Yeah. So
to feel what it's like to be a human.
And she manipulates her way.
Yeah. So there's the in a way kind of the lead in a way is Gabriel Byrne.
Yeah.
Important to mention him because in a way he kind of is the lead. He's generally not remembered as much, even though he is most of our focal point is from his point of view. So he's a animator, believes that he's created the cool world when actually it's the cool world that's kind of manipulated him into whatever, these kind of things. And he's in prison. I forget what for.
Well, this is one of the dark tones of the film. He's in prison for killing his wife's lover.
Yes. Yeah,
which they sort of skim over.
That's right. Yeah. So he's and then he gets out. So he's done his time. Done his porridge.
Brilliant scene where he goes into a comic shop.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's sort of recognised.
Yeah.
And it must be a bit of a spoiler, but it must be a cameo, an old bloke. Asks him up and says, "Who are you?"
Yeah, I'm forgetting the name. I think it's an underground. When I say famous in underground comics.
Yeah, I just assumed it was someone.
But I forget his name, and I don't want to say it incorrectly. But I do in my head. I know.
So I was right. That was a.
I'm pretty sure.
But that's a really fun scene in a way as well, and funny. And there's a sign on the wall saying that you can buy a signed comic that he signed from prison for $150, and he's just in there signing all this stuff, which is really cool. And the woman behind the counter really fancied him. But I mean, a lot of the humour in the movie does work, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So I do really very much enjoy this film. I've seen it a few times. Every time I see it, I still think it's as crazy and as wacky as it always was. Yeah. I do think, though, when I first saw it, I wasn't capable, as at the age I was, to really appreciate it in the way that I think you should. So I'm glad that I came back to it later and actually realized, actually it's even though I did kind of enjoy it when I was younger, I enjoyed it more as an adult and understanding the humor more.
Yeah.
Because even though the film in a lot of ways could be seen as kind of not so sophisticated, there is a lot of sophistication in there. Bakshi's work always has had that. It's just understanding it. And I think also he's quite a political guy, though this film is probably a little less on the politics side, though there are still subtle elements in there. Yeah. And if you're not necessarily into his politics, I again can see why people will be like, oh, don't really like that kind of thing. Yeah. But for me personally, if you look at it from just a look point of view, it's fantastic. It looks great. It's wonderful. Combination of the real world, then kind of blending in. I love that in the core world, when we go into the part that is animation, that there are moments where it's not animation. It's like cardboard cutout sort of thing. It's like a set that's bleeding into now this animated world. I think that's brilliant. I love it.
It looks great. It's clearly done on purpose as well. It doesn't look kind of cheap. It just looks okay. I get that.
You get what's happening. You see the sort of changing. It's almost like your mind's figuring it out, like you're changing from world to world sort of thing. And you need some time to adjust. I love it. I love that. I think it's great.
And it's really got that. I mean, it's pretty much all new characters. There are a few. I did notice, very briefly, there's an old Mickey Mouse in there.
Yes.
And Daffy Duck's face appears very quick. But they probably, I don't know, they might not even have the rights.
No, they wouldn't have.
They just sort of slid it in. Yeah. Whereas when this is obviously, even though it's 4 years later, compared to Roger Rabbit, and seen as the adult version, which in a way it is.
You can understand the comparison, but like I say, the story and everything was created well before Roger Rabbit was made.
So Roger Rabbit probably helped get this made.
Absolutely, on the production side, certainly.
Yeah, but it's also that noir feel, which is in it.
Yeah.
But the fact that all the characters are new design, but they feel like they come out the 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. I think the whole film looks great, and it isn't like the time spent on the just character design alone is phenomenal. Yeah. And it all looks. You could if you showed this to a random child, they'd think that these characters have been around for years. I think, and that is part of the beauty of it. They did create this whole world.
Yeah.
They didn't just get a load of existing things and throw them together. It sounds like I'm criticising Roger Rabbit. I love Roger Rabbit. Yeah. And also the comparison would be between the Hollywood character and Jessica Rabbit.
Yes.
They're very similar. Just the way they speak and the look. But also, I'm reading some reviews of this on Letterboxd. A lot of people like that. They see it as that this is that step further.
Yeah.
It's almost like this is what, when adults watch Roger Rabbit, this is what they wanted to see. Right. So a few people mention that.
Yeah. I get that. I understand that thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole sort of noir side of it really fits in with that era of animation, because a lot of it was based around that.
Sure.
It wasn't. Nowadays, most sort of family stuff and it all focuses around sort of superheroes, that side of comics, but people forget the comic book side of the detective, Dick Tracy, and not so much in this, but back then, westerns, cowboys was a big thing. So I like that this is made in '92, just before when you think of comic book movies, you think of superheroes. It's just before that really broke through. Obviously, there was a few, and Kim Basinger was in the biggest one. Batman, and so just going on to the cast, we haven't really mentioned Basinger much. She was huge when this came out.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
She had sort of a 10-year spell of being one of the biggest, biggest in Hollywood, and this is to the tail end of it, but 5 years after this, she sort of dipped a bit after this, and then done LA Confidential, another noir. Which,
absolutely, and won the Oscar for that one.
Yeah, so, and this is one of those movies that Gabriel Byrne went on to bigger things after this.
He did, but he was a name at this point.
He was a character actor.
Absolutely, very very popular.
Yeah.
At this point. But yeah.
Yeah. Have you done your research for people who were going to be cast instead of? Because I found.
Well, I know Kim Basinger. They were thinking Drew Barrymore.
Yeah.
Other than that, Pitt was always a thing that they wanted.
But the director wanted him for the Gabriel Byrne character.
Right. Yeah.
And so did he want to play that character as well, and they said no. The studio.
Yeah.
So I kind of see.
But I don't know about the Gabriel. I don't know if
Gabriel Byrne. They originally wanted William Dafoe.
Oh, okay, William Dafoe No,
and also for Kim Basinger's character, Tracy Lords was up there for the mix as well.
No way.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, I suppose, but yeah.
That's when I imagine that was when they wanted to be grittier. And did you know that the character Hollywood was originally called Debbie Dallas?
Yes, as in after Debbie does Dallas.
But by all accounts, it was going to be a lot.
I mean, the original. Sorry, yes, you kept finishing on.
No, I was just going to say, but things like that it could have been a different film, a lot grittier, a lot dirtier.
Yeah, I was going to say that was the thing I was about to say was that it was originally this film is, like I say, it was not exactly what the filmmakers wanted. The original script is a lot darker, a lot nastier.
Yeah.
And just dirtier, sleazier.
And I think if it had have been that movie, I think it would have done a lot worse than it actually did do. It didn't do great at all.
No,
but I think
bombed.
I think it would have bombed even more so.
Maybe.
But I think it would be remembered more.
Differently. Yeah, it'd be a different remember, and the infamy would make more sense. I'd say. I'm not that there is really infamy with this, but with the director there is. Yeah. So,
and the shame about this film is. It's kind of forgotten, and it's better than that.
Yeah,
it deserves.
It really is. It really is better than the attitude that generally comes around when you hear people talk about that film. So, it's a really good. It is a really sure. It's flawed, and it's a bit of a mess for reasons that we've mentioned. But
it's so enjoyable.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
We haven't mentioned the soundtrack. It's got like a jazzy and electro score.
There is with similar to Se7en, has lots of industrial music like Ministry and Thrill Kill Cult. Which I think mix really well with, like you say, the jazzy noir-y kind of feel to the atmosphere.
And it's just
very 90s.
But that mix of the modern stuff with the 40s, it sort of sums the film up.
Yes.
And then you've got people like Moby and Bowie on the soundtrack.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Bowie does Cool World. The theme tune, Cool World.
Yeah. But the music, critically acclaimed. It did do good reviews for the soundtrack, and the soundtrack done quite well. People forget there was video games. There was DC done a 4-part comic.
Yeah. They really tried. They really tried with this.
But from what I heard, what I researched, they did, and then they pulled a lot of the promotion because they got in a bit of trouble with the Hollywood side.
Yeah.
Did they put a massive? Was it one of the characters on the Hollywood side?
I think that's right. Yeah, it'd be Hollywood.
Yeah, it was on and complaints.
Yes, sure.
Galore.
Yeah.
And they paid to do it, and then had to pay more to get it all.
Yeah.
And I think that bad press worried them, and they pulled a lot of the.
Right.
Which is a shame, because I can remember after reading it, I remember adverts and comics for the video games and stuff.
Yeah,
it was Ocean done a few games on a few formats. This back in the days of the Nintendo and Sega sort of boom.
Yeah.
And I could see that is designed for that, really.
Absolutely.
It's just, I don't know. It's one of those that I'm so glad you're showing it because. I hate to say it's a film I haven't even thought about for years. And then when I did rewatch it yesterday, and bits of it came flooding back. But all the way through it, I would like to say it is a bit all over the place. And I watched it in the morning before work, and like brains have a and it is a film I just want to see on the big screen.
I'm very happy about putting it on.
And it's you know me, I sort of a hobby of mine is going about the place and finding other cinemas and different. This never comes up.
No,
and it should.
It is an unusual one in that regard. I was just thinking, just hearing you talk about like how your feelings on it, like when you're watching it and stuff. I've seen it a number of times over the years, and there've always been quite big gaps between whenever I see it. And every time I see it, I feel differently about it. Like, I look at it, it's almost like I'm seeing it differently. Yeah. And I think that's really nice. There's something quite nice about that every single time, I'm very conscious of that. Like, of course, I do see it differently because you age and you change yourself, so your perspective is slightly different. But I'm very conscious of it when I watch this film, and I think it may be because I saw it, when it came out, very soon after it came out as a rental. So it's quite early, like 10, 11 years old, which is slightly too young for this kind of film, because there's stuff in there that I think is, not just smarter. There's just smart stuff in there in the writing that you're not going to get at that age yet. Yeah. And I think over the years I've become more and more sort of like realizing, just noticing things more and having a slightly different perspective on it. And
so, Cool World VHS.
Yeah.
Screening on the 31st, 7:30.
That's the one.
PM. What else have we got coming up?
All right. Well, we could do right at this particular moment. We are still showing Conclave, the movie about the bishops trying to choose a new pope.
Yeah,
that's right. Both seen that one, haven't we?
Ray Fiennes,
nominated for awards and perhaps going to win some. Didn't at the Golden Globes though.
No, but definitely one of the dramas of.
Oh, absolutely! It's doing very well.
Of the season.
Well, yeah.
John Lithgow as well. He's really good, and no one's talking about him in this movie.
That's a shame. That's a real shame, because you're right. He's great in it, and he does his great his own Lithgow thing. That make him him.
Yeah, and Merchant Ivory.
Yeah, so
the one screening of this documentary.
Yeah, the documentary on the movies of Merchant and Ivory, as it were. So very famous movies like. Howard's End and Room Review and things like that. Very British and Indian movies. So come along and see that if you're interested in them as filmmakers. Yeah.
And Queer.
Yes. The Daniel Craig film. Adaptation of the book by Burroughs.
Burroughs, yes.
Yeah. Not one of his most famous books. I think written long time before it was published. I think it was published in the 80s, so long after it was written. It's kind of like a follow-up to his first novel, Junkie, I think. You've seen it.
Yeah.
I understand, yeah. So I have read the book many years ago, and is it where he goes to Mexico, and is that right? Is that the he's in Mexico, and he's kind of like he's hiding out because he's murdered someone back home, basically. And is that told?
No,
they don't bring any of that up. So it's kind of a semi autobiographical thing where he
goes there to almost discover himself.
That's right. So and is he looking for a drug? Isn't this a thing? I remember from the book that he's looking for this kind of elusive drug. But falls in love with somebody.
It's all about the. Can he have a relationship because of the way he loner and that sort of, but it's really well made film. Performances are great. Feels very David Lynch to me.
Right. Okay.
And it's a director who done what was the big film he done last year? The Challengers, isn't it?
Is that right?
I think so.
Oh, right, so the guy who did another one we showed at King Street. We showed Challengers, but I think Call Me by Your Name.
Yeah, that was the big one. I've not seen that.
Which we showed when it came out.
And the Blood one. He done a vampire one with
really?
The guy from with Wonka and.
Oh really? I don't know this movie. Okay.
Yeah, I forget what it was called. Bones and All.
Bones? No, yes, we. What am I talking about? We showed that as well. Yeah, I forgot that's a vampire. I thought more cannibalism, but is it vampire? Is it?
It is cannibalism. I'm sure it suggests.
I haven't seen.
I fell asleep.
Did you? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So, but this one was good.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it's another one visually stunning and definitely worth a big screen venture. And great performances.
All right.
And music, actually. It's a weird one. It's kind of, it works, but there's a lot of Nirvana and that sort of thing in it.
Okay.
Which is considering when it's set.
Yeah.
And not just covers. There's Come As You Are's played in full.
So they do this kind of like anachronism kind of things out of time.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And so about vampires, Nosferatu.
Well, yes, Nosferatu, indeed. The Robert Eggers his version classic. Was it Murnau film from 1922, which also was made, I think it's been made quite a few times, but another famous one was Herzog's version in '79.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you again have seen this.
Yes, very good. It's I have to say I was very disappointed with Eggers' last movie, The Northman.
Yeah.
And this is right back on track. Feel of the 20s one. Another one, the great performances. The score is amazing. It really is. It just has that feel. And whenever I think back about it, I think it was in black and white, but it wasn't.
Right,
Does that make sense?
Of course.
That...
Well, I from what I've seen of it, the promotion for it, and it has this idea of you almost can't see what's going on, kind of thing. Like everything's so dark. In it that it's So that's kind of what you're saying. I mean, the poster itself, it almost looks entirely black, but there is a person, there is a figure in the darkness. Yeah.
Which is cool.
It's kind of interesting. Yeah. Risky stuff, I'd say, in a way.
Yeah, it doesn't feel the mainstream film that it kind of is becoming.
Right.
Which is a good thing.
But he's not necessarily really a mainstream director, is he?
He's not a mainstream director at all.
Yeah. But his films have done well.
And this movie, you can't remake Nosferatu and make it mainstream anyway. So the fact that this is doing the business is good, obviously, but listeners to this podcast won't go in expecting a blockbuster style film. No, and it's not that. It's not the Bram Stoker's, the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula. It's not any of that. It's an arty film.
Right. Well, there we go.
With some violence.
Some violence.
It's very, very. I wouldn't say sexy. The word you used is a horny film.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Well worth seeing, and you've got that on for a week, I believe, from the 23rd, Saturday 23rd to Thursday.
Saturday 25th to Thursday 30th.
Yeah. So it's on the Sunday as well, isn't it? So it's 3 days.
It is on the Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah. Well worth seeing.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that one. So,
Cool. So anything else you want to mention for next month?
Well, for next month.
This month when it comes out.
So Maria as well, which I think is again doing the Wardy kind of movie. Who we got? Angelina Jolie, is that right?
Yeah.
In our lead here.
Yeah, that's.
I don't really know too much about this one. I know it's directed by the person that directed Jackie, which I remember seeing, but Jackie Onassis just after Kennedy was shot.
Yeah.
Did you see that one starring Natalie Portman?
Yes.
Yeah. So I quite like that one. And Spencer, Princess Diana.
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. There you go. So it's I'm sure in that vein, if you like those kind of films, it's definitely one for you, I'd say.
Yeah. So next month, which we'll lead on to now, we're going to be talking about Singles.
Yes. The Cameron Crowe 1992 movie about some young people growing. I don't know. What would you say? It's a romance film comedy. It's a romantic comedy, certainly, isn't it?
In the grunge scene.
Being the grunge scene. Young adults going to see bands they live in Seattle, and it's kind of like about their lives with their backdrop being grunge music.
Yeah. And that's going to be part of the VHS.
Yeah, that's a VHS movie.
And this is a movie I've not seen for a long time as well.
Me neither.
And it'd be interesting to talk about that one. And should we just quickly end? Top 5 films from 2024.
All right. Yeah.
Can you remember yours? Because you've.
Okay, so
shall I do mine first?
You want to go first?
Because yours is more what's been on at King Street.
Oh, yeah, three of the 5.
Whereas mine isn't so much, but okay. Number 5.
Yeah.
Most people would disagree with my top 5. I don't care. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I love that franchise. They've done a new one. It was a banger.
All right.
Number 4, Maxine. Ty West horror trilogy, X-trilogy. This one's set in the 80s. It's like Italian horror slasher.
Loved
it. Number 3, I really liked it. I don't care. Terrifier 3. I move on.
Okay.
Number 2, from Terrifier 3 to the latest adaptation of the Count of Monte Cristo. Number 2, which I thought was a banger. And number 1, you showed it. Only cinema on Ipswich show it. The animated French-Spanish movie, Robot Dreams. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Why do you laugh at my top 5?
I was laughing at your the way you're trying to gloss over these movies. like I know everyone hates these films or makes fun of me for liking them so much. Moving on. But no, Robot Dreams is certainly a classic in the making, isn't it?
I will add that my number 6 was The Promised Land, which you showed.
So
there we go.
Well, there we go.
And over to your top 5.
All right, so at number 5 was The Joker. Was it Folie à Deux?
Part 2.
But I thought it was great. I think I also love the fact that a lot of people really disliked it, and yet at the same time a lot of other people really liked it. I like that it was one of them kind of chalky, cheesy kind of films. I thought it was wonderful, so much better than the original film. So this is one of their movies that if they stop there, the sequel was much better than the original, which is a very rare thing. For Francis Ford Coppola's movie that he'd been wanting to make for decades now, Megalopolis. Again, so many people dislike this one. So many critics just thinking it's one of the worst movies of the year, in fact, and a lot of other people thinking the same. Completely wrong. This was fantastic. In fact, I think one of for me, Coppola's top 5 films. Thought it was absolutely brilliant and well worth the wait after all these years. So I'm very happy that he got to make that, because it could possibly be his last movie. At number 3, Wim Wenders' Perfect Days. Well, certainly the most beautiful, for me, the most beautiful, most uplifting, most human film of the year. Absolutely loved it.
That's in my top 10.
There we go. Number 2, one of certainly the darkest and most depressing films of the year, but still wonderful, with fantastic compositions and terrifying story and brilliant acting. The Zone of Interest, which came out for us almost at the beginning of the year, I think. So it almost feels like it almost feels like it was. I when I was thinking of this, top 5 films, and that one was in there for the year, I was like, wow, I thought that was the year before. So and number 2, and number 1, little Japanese movie called Evil Does Not Exist, which I just thought was one of the most wonderful things I've seen in a long time, in the sense that it just really captivated me. Very interesting storytelling, pacing, which was slow but still meaningful and lovely and meditative. It's an eco film. It's a film about nature and about our place in nature and the way that we treat nature. It's not very long. Again, perfect. So it encapsulates all the things that it wants to in a nice small package, and has a very ambiguous ending where you're not quite sure what the meaning is, so it leaves you to interpret it, which again I love. Beautiful, wonderful. There you go.
Yeah, good top 5.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the number 1, but
we did show it.
I know, sorry, but that's been in a lot of people's lists.
Oh, really?
But I've seen online.
Right. Okay.
So a good one. So we better wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to follow us. The cinema on the socials. Follow us as a podcast on Spotify and Amazon Music now. You also find it on YouTube, which you can find the King Street's whole YouTube channel.
Yeah,
we're on that, and keep going the cinema. Keep supporting it.
Absolutely.
And feedback, leave comments, messages.
Indeed, get involved.
And we'll be back in about a month to talk about singles, which I'm looking forward to. I've not seen that one for a long time.